Okay, I believe we're live now. Just confirming. Okay, I believe we're live.
Okay,
Hello
perfect.
everyone. I believe we're episode of the Game Time, where we basically showcase exciting games within the gaming ecosystem. And in today's episode, we have a very interesting game, right? We have a very interesting guest who, from what you can see on your screen, is a very exciting game. I love this game personally because the game, basically the series the game is based upon is one I like, Wheels of Time. So it's a very exciting game. So we're very excited to share this game with you guys live. And on here we have Reres, who is also known as Resong. Hi, Reres. And before we get into introducing, because he'll have the flow, he'll have enough time to introduce the game. We want to actually state that there is actually a giveaway for this game. So Reres and his team are actually giving out game packs to everyone who is live in this section. And these game packs are basically worth $35 if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, to stand a chance to claim this, we'll be sharing a form at the end of this section. So that, and a code. So you go over to the form, you fill in the code to prove that you are in this section, and afterwards you can expect your prizes from Reres and his team. All right. I believe it's time to give Reres the floor to introduce himself to the community. Hi, Reres. How you doing, man?
Okay, perfect. There we go. Finally. Well, first of all, hello everyone. Dreadsong here. I'm essentially the BD lead for Aether Games, and I know I just find it funny that today I'm like absolutely like suited up and everything. I did have a meeting prior to this, so I was like I'm not even gonna change clothes or anything like that. And the reason I'm actually going over how this is a bit ironic actually is that I'm quite vocal about this whole situation with the AAA gaming industry kind of imploding a bit, and all the the big studios in the gaming industry overall kind of suffering lately. And I always say that, hey, it's all going bad because of all the suits coming into the gaming offices and everything. And here I am, like representing our game in a suit, and it's just ironic and everything. But there we go. But anyway, so yeah, let's get into it.
Thanks for introducing yourself, Reres. Guys, Reres is a very interesting guy. I've been in a couple calls with him, and I'm sure it will be an interesting section over here with him. But then let's get into your game, Reres, which is very interesting, very very interesting. Could you introduce your game, right? And what actually makes it unique, right? I mean, for those of us, having spoken with you guys a couple of times, haven't seen the game. I already know what makes it unique, but we want to hear it. The community wants to hear it, directly from the house mouth.
Let me actually start a bit with more of a story on essentially how our studio came into the space and everything. So we've actually been around for a while. We have been around since late 2021 to be exact. Now, funnily enough, back in 2021, more exactly November 2021, when we actually just went live with our Discord, officially in Web3, basically. We weren't Aether Games. We were actually Gates of Eternity. So back then, what we had in mind as a concept was not what we actually have today. Not a game studio, not a card game. We actually came onto the market with the plans of making a dark fantasy. Well, essentially an AR catcher type game, if we want to call it that. So basically, we had a dark fantasy version of essentially what was Pokemon. You had different dragons that you can catch, different creatures from within our own IP. And eventually, what ended up happening is that we kind of got like a bit more accustomed to how Web3 moves, how Web3 essentially flows around, and we were like, okay, if we actually want to do this, it won't work by Web3 standards because the developmental time for the game that we had in mind would have been quite long. And what ended up happening is that we kind of did a bit of a pivot. We went from being a standalone title essentially to being a full-fledged studio. Um, Now, because the fact that our team had a lot of experience when it came down to basically developing card games specifically, and we were like, okay, what game would actually fit Web3 the best? And we were like, card games. Card games would be a very good fit, and ironically, our whole team has like a lot of experience with card games. So that's when we essentially did the proper pivot from the original Gates of Eternity, which was the title of essentially the dark fantasy catcher type game, and we went with what we have now as Cards of Eternity, which ironically at first was also called Cards of Eternity. So basically, a bit of a play on the
Yeah.
original title we had. Yeah,
Mm.
go ahead.
Oh, good. I was just agreeing with you. It makes sense. ETH,
Oh, okay,
eternity.
okay. Yeah. And yeah, this is basically in short, the story of how we essentially ended up with the game we have right now. Now, another funny thing is that initially, um, our game was actually meant to be a bit like Magic the Gathering. Now, when I say a bit like Magic the Gathering, what I mean is that we were essentially planning on having our broad title, which was for TCG actually, not Cards of Eternity. Cards of Eternity was meant to be like the subsections of E for TCG. So that also pivoted a bit, but yeah, essentially how it was meant to be was have the bro title, which was the base of everything as E for TCG, and then the subtitles, which were Cards of Eternity with the different IPs. So right now, since this is a perfect example, since we already have them on board, the Wheel of Time. The way we were envisioning it initially was that we'd have Cards of Eternity, the Wheel of Time, Cards of Eternity, I don't know, Lord of the Rings, Cards of Eternity, Street Fighter, so on and so forth. With different universes, different IPs, and different additions to our own base. But what ended up happening is that we realized, okay, it makes a lot more sense to just stick with the Wheel of Time. We signed contract with them, and what ended up happening is that we basically obtained, to say so, the rights. Actually, not necessarily the rights, but we basically have exclusivity with the Wheel of Time IP as their sole card game developers. So essentially, there will be no other studio besides ours that will be able to develop card games utilizing the Wheel of Time IP. So yeah, pretty substantial overall. So Cards of Eternity: The Wheel of Time that we have right now as a gaming title is basically the only card game that will be on the market utilizing the Wheel of Time title for until our contract expires. And I don't know, maybe the Wheel of Time studio doesn't want work with us anymore, so they just go with another studio. But if we end up renewing, we very likely might just be the sole developers of anything card game related for the Wheel of Time. So yeah, this is a bit of of a company introduction, a bit of company lore, if we may call it that, a bit of of a backstory on how we ended up where we ended up. But yeah, I mean, going
Yeah.
a bit deeper into the whole. Yeah, go ahead. If you want to say something, go ahead.
It's actually cool that you guys are partnering with one of the hottest series at the moment. Wheel of Time, is a very interesting series, and to have you guys, your game, at the intersection of one of the biggest, series right now, and also, a Web3 game, right? It's actually very interesting. And guys, for you, the viewers out there, this is a very rare opportunity. You're actually witnessing legend in the making, like literally, no pun intended. But yeah, that's very. Let's go over to the Web3 features proper. So, um, what was actually the story behind your studio and Web3 was actually, the reaction. I know, most times, there's a form of resistance in terms of Web3, which is understandable because most Web2 studios and Web2 platforms, kind of, push back on Web3 a bit. But was actually the story, the challenges you guys went through in order to finally say that, look, we're doing this, we're adding, we're integrating Web3, features into our game?
Okay, so I could go a bit heavier back and kind of give the full context on why we chose Web3. So our CEO Jens is actually an active esports manager. He works with a lot. He works quite heavily within the esports scene. So he has a lot of insight on the whole gaming industry as a whole. And I myself also have a Web2 background of working for the big studios. Worked specifically at EA and BioWare. This was BioWare, obviously being within EA back when I worked with them. And one of the main problems and one of the main things that we saw Web3 doing for the consumer itself was the ownership aspect. Like, this was always one of the main selling points that we went for. This was before actually was popular for games to go around and say, oh yeah, we're doing it all for the ownership, and people, we're building in Web3 because of ownership and stuff. So we were actually one of the first who actually came in for this whole narrative before it actually started being the motto of 2023's GAIMIN. No, we did this as a solution to different problems in actual traditional gaming right now. And essentially one of the main options that we want, actually not one of the main options, but one of the main friction points that we wanted to fix was the fact that, okay, you have these different gaming titles and the different genres, whatever you want to call it, and if it's free-to-play titles, especially, obviously there will be microtransaction options. There will be different assets within the games, and ultimately you will not be owning them. And to quote someone from the traditional gaming industry, a big name that I'm not actually gonna name itself, gamers when you buy a game, you don't actually own the game, so you should get used not actually owning your in-game assets. And this was this was I think this was around 2023 or 2024. I don't really remember the exact year they actually said this, and I was like, okay. And then you're surprised that people are building within Web3 with the idea of decentralizing assets, and I know that this is the winning point of of Web3, and actually putting games onto the blockchain. But going heavier into the question at hand, what we wanted to go for was actually letting people own what they actually own, not just in theory, but actually on paper as well. So inside of our, not going to this.
Yeah, but just to recap, what you said, oftentimes we get, this feedback from gamers in a lot of, especially games transitioning from Web2 to Web3. And this is actually very valuable. In fact, this is one of the core, things we believe in at gaming. We believe in ownership and limited censorship. We want, we visualize, a gaming ecosystem, a gaming world where everyone can come in and play and actually own, what they own in the game, right? Exactly. So yeah, you join, the league of, extraordinary game, developers out there. But yeah, it's time to go over the game. Dresong, I don't know if you can see the screen, but basically on our live section, we have the gameplay. Could you actually explain what is going on, in the game, or you could start with the previous question you wanted to delve into previously?
Yeah, so let me actually answer the question. By the way, I cannot see the live, so if you can throw me a link, that would be perfect, just so I properly have access to it as well. But yeah, while you do that, question. So with the whole is the game pay to win? Is there a specific whale status in game? It really comes down to certain aspects. So if you really want to go with the traditional sector way of doing it, just buy in-game currency. Like this would be the easiest. You can buy it however you want, and essentially what you do is that you buy the in-game fully answering the question. One of the main advantages that you have, and this is essentially one of the, I would call it, advantages of Web3 as well, is that because of the whole tradability aspect of the game, you don't actually have to go through the, I guess you could call it, microtransactions path. You don't have to just go in the game, buy currency, and start buying and to buy building a deck for that. No, if you actually know what you want to build, if you're looking for some specific guides, or if you have the game downloaded and you're just browsing for different cards, go on the marketplace, buy whichever cards you want, buy them from other players, and right now at this specific point, with roughly, I would say, $200-300, you would have an actual top level deck. So this is one of the advantages as well, and one of the things that Web3 enables. As a new player, you don't actually have to go through the grind of buying countless amounts of microtransactions and in-game currency, and basically essentially praying that you're going to be getting the cards that you want. No, just go on the marketplace, buy whichever cards you want. You can literally just straight up make your own deck that you want to make off of buying the cards you need or want off of other people, and instead of spending $2,000 on getting that one specific card that you might be unlucky on not getting, go and buy it, period. And it's much cheaper, much more user friendly. Once you, I don't know, maybe the deck gets nerfed and you want to get rid of it and switch to another, sell the card, there you go. You don't have the limitations of being stuck with it. But yeah, you also, again, going back into the whole is the game pay to win? No, it's not. You can literally just continuously play in game, grind the ladder. Our systems are very grind friendly as well. Everything is made so that you can literally just play the game and accumulate a ton of resources, just naturally keep opening packs. And as mentioned, as a very new player, if you want a top deck, $200 is pretty cheap. Comparing to Hearthstone, for example, where you'd essentially kind of need go to that extent of spending $500-600 to get half a top deck, and not being able to sell the cards afterwards either. Well, there you go. You have these different options of comfort, essentially. But yeah, fully free to play, friendly. The entry fee, if you really want to go whale mode, is not that essentially high either. It's quite, if you want to unlock everything from the get-go and go super competitive, super fast, it's pretty it's pretty cheap to do so. And yeah, as mentioned, everything is tradable, so there's no handicaps in that aspect of having to get stuck with different assets or anything like that. So yeah.
Okay. I believe that answers that, because a lot of people actually worry about play to win games, right? A lot of people in their words feel like the gaming tradition is dying, right? You see new gamers come to the stage and then splash some cash, and the grind culture basically in gaming is no more. But yeah, good to understand that there's actually a balance in the game between grinding and actually assets that can actually enhance gameplay. But then I believe you can see the screen now. Can you?
Yes, I can.
Okay, can you just walk through, let's use 5 minutes to kind of walk through what's happening on screen, how do people actually play this? Okay.
Yeah, so I actually did give the example of Hearthstone as like a counterplay to I guess our game. The reason I did that also is that obviously Hearthstone right now is kind of king of TCG. Everyone knows Hearthstone. Kind of everyone who's a fan of card games are basically like they are playing or have played or are following Hearthstone. And one of the main elements that we actually wanted to, I guess you could say, respect was the familiarity. So you're not gonna jump into the game and have no idea what's happening. The game is very similar to other TCGs. It's very easy to actually discern what's happening. Very easy to actually get the gist of how the game plays. And yeah, one of the overall, it's very simple to understand. But we do have obviously our how should I call it, differences in gameplay. So if we're actually looking at Luca's screen right now, playing the game, there's specific elements that are not um, typical to other card games. So bottom left and top right is actually one of the unique mechanics that we have, and that's basically the companion mechanic. Now, what exactly are the companions? Essentially, starting turn 4, with a couple of exceptions. There are a couple of there is a specific one actually that does not respect this rule, but I'm not gonna go too in depth on the game mechanics. But yeah, usually starting turn 4, the companion is basically a one use effect that is usually quite strong. So the starting companion that we can also see on screen right now on Luca's end, that would be Zomara. And what it does is that it basically gives you more max health and it draws cards for you. But there's also different effects, such as deal damage, silence the whole board, literally erase the board, discard cards from your opponent, so on and so forth. There's quite a few companions. Each of them does something else. Each companion usually has a tendency to fit into different decks. Funnily enough, Zomara, although it is the starting companion, actually does fit really well in draw heavy decks. So we actually did have a OTK deck that was actually running Zomara specifically because it was trying to milk as many of its own deck's cards as fast as possible. So obviously, our players were playing Zomara for that, and yeah, everything has a use. Everything has different effects. Another effect that we have, I mean, Luca just finished his match, so that's also that. But another effect that we actually
So,
have that's
sorry,
very
sorry
unique.
for cutting you
Yeah, go
short.
ahead, go ahead.
Is Luca winning right now?
He literally just won.
Oh, nice one, Luca. Yeah, you can continue. Yeah.
We have to our game is what we actually call the burn mechanism. So what you can do is if you actually, well, he's not in the game anymore right now, but if you actually look at your turn counter in game, you'll actually see that each player has an X amount of some specific crystals, which are specifically called sacrifice crystals. So what you can do in the game is that you can sacrifice different cards from your hand in order to actually regain essentially one power, which is the in-game resource that you utilize to play cards, and basically you can double down on your turn. So let's give an example. You are on turn 5. You just start your turn, and you play a 5 cost card. Now, if you actually want to continue your turn and utilize the bird mechanism sacrifice option, what you can do is that you can take any card of any specific cost, you can burn it and get its cost back. So since it's turn 5 and you have 5/1 power by default and you played a 5 resource cost card, that means that you're now on 0. So let's say that you want to play another 4 cost card, for example. So what you'll want to do is that you'll want to burn a card that's of equal or higher cost than that, and you're basically going to get its resource cost back in the maximals of actually how much one power your turn has. So for example, if your turn 5, as mentioned, with 5 resource, if you burn an 8 cost card, normally it should give you 8 resource back. But in this case, since you're on turn 5, you're only going to be getting 5. But it essentially, as mentioned, it lets you double down on your turn. But if you do want, play a lower cost card, so let's say that you have 5 resource, you already played a 5 resource cost card, and now you're on 0, but you want to play a 2 resource card, you can burn a card that costs 2 or 3 1 power, and then you can basically play that 2 cost card, and there you go. But yeah, obviously it is a bit of a volatile mechanic. You do have to keep in mind that you are actively burning cards in your hand, so you can run out of cards quite fast. But yeah, there's that.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually an in-depth walkthrough of the video, of the game rather. And we have some questions. We're approaching the end of the section. Maybe we'll use 5 minutes to attend to some questions. So we have a question from Elena. Is this game on the gaming platform? Are you coming? Yes, it's actually live on the gaming platform. You can access it, through the gaming platform. Cards of Eternity, Wheels of Time is the name of the game. So most of you who actually follow the series, this would be very, very familiar for you. And another question, is basically for you. So they're asking about, the in-game transactions. Are they on-chain? Do you require gas fees or anything of that nature?
Yes. So there's different on-chain mechanics right now. First of all, the tokenization aspect is one of the most important aspects. So I kind of wanted to go over this a bit earlier, but you kind of cut me off. So now would be the time to actually go into this. Essentially, whenever you open card packs in the game, the cards you receive are not NFTs. They're Web2 assets, so they're untreatable. But you can tokenize them. You can essentially buy our token. You can nest a few tokens inside of that specific card. And through this process, you tokenize it, you put it on chain, and you can start trading it from that process. Obviously, that does cost a bit of gas, but it's cheap, so that'd be a problem. Everything is done on ETH right now, so it would be ETH costs. We are EVM compatible, and essentially the other transaction style, I guess you could call it, would be essentially trading on the different market. Now, this is not directly done in game. It's done through Magic Eden, OpenSea, depends on place of choice that we are essentially tradable on, and yeah, that obviously will also adhere to the marketplace rules themselves. We do plan on building our own marketplace and actually allowing people to just trade cards directly through in game.